Testing to see if the mics are working. Yes, they are. Hello.
Does something, and I'm going to keep saying things again.
Are you trying to get your volume up?
Yes, I am. Oh, it's all fine. You got it.
Okay. Do you want to do the intro while I get my notes up?
Yeah, all right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Worldbuilding 101 session here at Team Comic-Con.
Yes.
Birmingham.
Can you all hear Liv okay?
Can you hear me? No.
Amazing shaking head.
Okay, now can you hear me? All right.
Nodding heads, I love that.
That's good because the intro I just did was bad. So, hi, welcome to Worldbuilding 101 with myself, Liv Kennedy from Three Black Halflings and Dicebreaker, and Zoe Delahunty-Light. Hello.
Hello, I'm Zoe Delahunty-Light. I've been DMing since the age of 15, and I am not 15 now, so some time has passed.
Yeah.
And I'm also in the Brent Quest Club on the Eurogamer channel, and
I'm DMing.
You do DM.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we both have loads of DMing experience, both in actual plays and in my case, I DM'd all the way through university. After that and before that, my first DM session was forcing my family to play with me around a table.
Oh, you succeeded?
I did. It lasted one session and they never wanted to do it again.
But you did it.
But I did it.
Yeah.
So yeah, today's panel is all about world building tips for DMs because both myself and Liv are excited about homebrews. So what that means is that we typically create our own worlds and then let players explore it.
Yeah.
So whereas with Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, you have obviously the Dungeon Master's Guidebook, which you can turn to for loads of really good advice.
Yeah.
We decided to make it more difficult for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask? I love a little poll. So if you strictly stay in the world of like Faerun and do not dabble in homebrew at all, can you raise your hand? Oh, one person is like, no, I stick to the rules. Love that. And everyone else who does homebrew. Yeah.
Oh, I love homebrewers. Isn't it fun?
It's your world. You get to play in it. It's great. Yeah.
But creating your own world obviously comes with difficulties because there's loads of really boring stuff that you don't realize you need to think about until your players start messing up with the finances.
Yep.
So my first bit of advice is to work out three things.
Yeah.
How much does a loaf of bread cost? How much is a week's wages for the ordinary person? And my last thing that I wrote down is how much a horse costs. Because they always need to buy horses.
They always need horses, yeah.
So the reason I have those three levels is because knowing how much a loaf of bread costs, you can really easily scale that for like a meal, a beer, a fancy meal. It just gives you something really easy to base your players on.
Yeah.
And also you can then tell how wealthy or poor they are based on how much money they have.
Yeah, I love that. That's like a nice like hack way of doing it. Like so you don't have to think about it too much. I'm gonna steal that because oftentimes they'll be like, oh yeah, we go and have a meal, and I'm like, cool, that's a gold, and they're like, a gold? No, in this economy? I'm like, oh right, yeah, no, 2 copper pieces, of course, I meant that.
And then 2 copper pieces is way too cheap.
Yeah, and you're like, oh god,
So that's really good for base level building. After that, you want to work out how much a week's worth of wages cost because that will then give you an idea of quest rewards at really low levels.
Yeah.
So, like if I, for example, earn £200 a week working at my job, my quest reward might be 150 depending on how eager I am for this piece to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And especially for lower levels, this is really useful because at higher levels, they can just give you gems or like a scroll, magic scroll or whatever. But when you're at a lower level, you want to make sure that you do stay within those bounds of like, essentially The Witcher.
Yeah.
If you're going to a village and they want you to get rid of a bandits nearby, they're not going to give you 100 gold. They'll maybe have 5 silver to give you.
Or like Skyrim is also a good example as well. And I may lean into a lot of Skyrim stuff with my DMing particularly because it's my go-to. It's what I grew up with, you know? So yeah, I think also like not being afraid to have something that you use as a resource, something that you know quite well, like Skyrim, like The Witcher, is also quite helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And if they don't trade in money, instead try and do like those fucking villages in Minecraft do. If I wanted a loaf of bread, what would I have to trade you for it? Would I have to trade you useful knowledge, a story, like passage safely down the road? There's not a world in fantasy that has to be based on capitalism. It can be based on trade and that kind of like economy, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, how much a horse costs, because they'll always need to buy one. Always need to buy one, and it also puts a value on beasts in the world.
Yeah.
So it lets you decide how valuable a horse is. For example, I like having a horse to be quite expensive because it gets the players used to the idea of A, they're going to have to go by foot everywhere to begin with, which then helps them discover more stuff. But also, if the horse is expensive, when they get one, they then have an emotional and financial investment in keeping that horse alive.
Oh, which they often forget to do in my campaigns. They're like, oh, we have to go to this place the horses can't go. We'll leave them here. They come back and they're gone.
Yeah.
They're gone. And I hate to
Just
do it
gone.
to them, but they're just
Whereas
gone.
if that horse cost maybe like 10 gold and that took them 3 sessions to save up for, they might not want to let Bill die, maybe.
Yeah, build the horse. Also, is it just me? Like my players are like, okay, cool, we'll get this boat and then we'll like go across here and we'll go in a caravan and blah blah blah. And I'm like, you can get horses. You can get transportation.
That's another really good point. Work out the transport network of your realm that you're in. Does it have one? Are there roads? Who keeps the roads in good order? Are there some roads that are in better condition than others? What risks might that bring? Yes, there may be some inns along the way, but does that mean it's more of a target for bandits? Like, these are all really boring things. No one likes to think about infrastructure, but it is critical to building a believable world that you can have in your brain, and then you can just pull bits from whenever you need them, and you're not left kind of stumbling.
I'm afraid we did the fun stuff on Friday when we did like Dungeon Master 101. We were like, yeah, do this. You confuse your players, this and that and the other.
Yeah, you get infrastructure and economy today.
Yeah.
Well done. Okay, so another semi-boring thing to think of, but I think is quite interesting, is where do people get their food? If they're in a town or in a city, then okay, they go to a shop and get it.
Yeah.
If they're in a hamlet, where do they get their food? Do they grow it? Do they buy it from a merchant who comes once every week? Are there fields outside of the city that if they were burnt by a bandit would cause a mass panic?
Ooh.
These are interesting things that can create really cool story plot points. Especially, again, scales really well for low players.
Yeah.
So if you have a farmer whose sheep or pigs have been stolen that they need to eat, there's an essential urgency in that rather than could you clean the rats out of my basement?
Yeah, absolutely. These are really good finite points that I often don't find myself thinking about. So like, honestly, this is really interesting.
I'm autistic, so I think about everything.
And I have ADHD, so I think about nothing. I like a lot of things that like work for me. My usual go-to is like, if they're in a place with plentiful wildlife and they want to go out and they want to hunt, they have to be able to do that. They have to have that survival skill, you know? That's really important. So there are alternatives, but also thinking about how things are affected in your world, like you were saying, is really important.
Yeah, and that leads me on to my next point, which is, for homebrews, one of the most fun things I love doing is creating local fauna and flora. But when it comes to having flora and fauna near settlements, it's a really good idea to have a sliding scale of not dangerous at all, it's basically like cowslip, to incredibly dangerous, will burn your face off, don't go to that bit of the forest.
Yeah.
And just creating those, like, fauna or flora is really fun, but it also means that you can kind of start to build this into the mythos of the realm that you're building.
Yeah.
And by the way, like, when you're starting a homebrew, I think it's really important to mention that unless your characters have lost all of their memory, or they are a wee baby, they will have some passive knowledge of the world they're in.
Yeah.
And exposition is exhausting.
Oh god, yeah.
So instead what I like to do is to write almost a guidebook, like with the really basic things you'd know. So like local powers that you'd inevitably know of, like whether you have a king or a queen or a monarch or whatever. If you grew up in a specific area, local dangers, like just basic things that you would know. Like everyone knows don't eat red berries, okay? Don't eat red berries.
Blue flower, red thorns, that kind of thing. That's really good. And also, I think what's great about doing that, having those things planned out, is that they will lead into quests for your party so naturally. Like if there is a wildlife species that really shouldn't be in this area, like it's inevitable that there's going to be a quest for your players to go on to like have to get rid of that danger for people in the area.
Especially for druids, that can be a really fun thing for them, because then they're not only doing a quest that is interesting, but it relates to their passion, which is obviously flora and fauna.
Yeah, sure.
So another thing that is really important for me to bear in mind when I'm building areas, number one, draw a map. Like,
yes, absolutely, I was going to say.
Yeah. It's so good with putting yourself in the mindset of where you are, but also like just thinking about common sense things, like if this is a hamlet, there kind of has to be a road near it, otherwise how people get there. This is a fishing village, so where does this river lead to? Does it lead to a lake? Does it lead to the sea? Just like really common sense stuff that you might only think about when you're sitting there drawing a map.
Yeah, I think for me, because I cannot draw to save my life, like I really cannot. So there are online resources that I use, like Incarnate. Incarnate is a really good one. Like even if you don't go into like, okay, and there's this mountain range here, and then I'm going to put this here, and there's this like lead off here, you can just have the kind of basics, like there's a city up north, there's a city down south, like there is a mountain range along here. Just as long as you have like a vague kind of like image in your head of what the world looks like, it really, really helps.
Massively. And then that influences the people that they meet along the way. If you have a village at the foot of a mountain ridge, you'll probably have people who herd goats, because it's a naturally good area to like bring up goats, because they'll eat quite tough vegetation and stuff. Another thing to think about when you're creating settlements is what's the like power here. And for me, it usually falls into 3 categories. It's either religion, money, or influence. So in somewhere like a village, I would argue maybe it's religion. Small village, quite insular, like don't really get out much. And then as you scale up to cities, it's more likely to have money and influence as your main powers. And you can even mix it up, like maybe your main power is crime, but having that in your brain as the thing that keeps the lifeblood or whatever area going, just like gets you in the mindset of, okay, who calls the shots here?
I think, so for example, in the new season of Break Quest Club, that I'm not going to give any spoilers for, but
it's so good though.
It's very exciting. This is one thing that will come to light fairly quickly. The place where our players are going to be like roaming around, the influence is crime big time.
Crime.
Big time crime.
Be gay, do crime.
Yeah, and what's fun about that is like, beforehand I don't think I've like made a kind of world where crime was the main influence. So like you get to like think about how that affects people, how that affects like, the general feeling of anxiety, or like if people are just like, yep, this is how we live, this is fine. You get to like make NPCs based around what that vibe is, which is really fun.
Yeah. So another way to incorporate that into your world is you never want players to feel like they're in kind of a storybook where their actions don't seem to affect much. We talked about this briefly on Friday, but what are the consequences and knock-on effects of their actions?
Consequences are so important.
Consequences. So for example, if you are fighting a bandit party, are they waiting for their boss to come back from a raid somewhere? What other information might they have stored at their camp? Why are they targeting travelers along the road? There's never just like a full stop to the end of an encounter. There should, well not should, but I find it fun if there's always like, you've just killed this woman's brother, now she's going to come out for revenge with you. If you kill a guard at the local town, now someone else has been promoted into his place, and they want to like find the people who did this to restore kind of calm to the world. So always be thinking of, okay, this happens, so what? And this isn't stuff you need to do with your players. You can do it in your mind after a session, and then if you bring back those threads later on, it's so fun to watch them realise.
Absolutely. And this is also something we mentioned on Friday, is like, if you're bad at keeping notes, which I am, definitely, you can also have like a shared like world doc that like everyone in the game uses. So like yourself, but also the players. So that if you're like, oh, actually I can't quite remember what happened, you can refer to the doc and be like, oh, this person noted it down. They're a lifesaver. So I think that like reflecting after a session is really important, because then you can like, suss out those leads and think, okay, how could they come back? What could they do? Like you were saying.
And also then that just makes them feel like they're in a living world, because things happen to knock on. So one of the issues that I had when I was like 15, which is like, Jesus Christ, calm down. Of course you had issues then, I know. It's creating bad guys that are realistic. So something that can really help you when you're trying to create a BBEG that's not just like necromancer wants people dead,
Yeah.
is desire, flaws, and motivation. Every single one of those things will be different. Their desire, make people dead. Their motivation, is it perhaps that they don't feel they can rely on people who are living? They prefer to rely on dead people who will just do what they say.
Oh, that's deep.
Yeah, have they maybe been betrayed in the past by everyone they've ever known and the only people they trust are the dead? Like, things like that just immediately make your character a little bit more deep. And then,
Imagine jumping to that though, just being like, I cannot trust the living. That would be
literally, I mean, that's black or white thinking. That's
Yeah.
autism. I love that. I'm autistic. I can say that. And then you have flaws. So often with your characters, this goes for player characters too. They can very much be like golden boys, gals, gentle thems, that kind of stuff. What are their flaws? What is the big, bad, evil guy's flaws? Because that just helps to round them out as a character. No one's perfect. And if they try to play a perfect character, they're going to end up being someone like Homelander. And although that's fun, it's kind of an annoying person to DM.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think that goes back to, I guess this is relevant for world building as well. Like, have a session 0 to make sure everyone's across like what kind of vibe you're bringing to the world, and to see if not only you can do things for this character that your player is bringing, but also what they can do for the world, what backstory have they got, and that's one of my main go-tos actually. Like somebody else's backstory, one of their backstories, my players, and using that to drive the plot forward. I feel like you see that quite a lot in like Critical Role, for example, where the backstories of the players are what drives the plot. I think it's really important to have that session 0 and collaborate with your players.
Yeah, definitely. The kind of thing that I ran into in some of my sessions in university is if something happens in a village or a hamlet, who keeps the law there?
Yeah.
If some idiot in your party randomly kills someone in a pub because it will be funny, what happens as a result? I mean, likely in a village or in a hamlet, there's not a guard per se, there's not like a central enforcement. So what is there? Is there mob justice?
Ooh.
Is there kind of like a local, what's the word, mediator, kind of like an elder who would like, decide what happens? Because yes, you need to have consequences for almost all of your players' actions, but it can be really hard. Like if you're in the middle of nowhere and they kill their NPC escort who's got them that far, what's going to happen? Like obviously, hopefully you'd have infighting in your group, but you need to think of like, in the middle of nowhere, how would consequences be delivered? Maybe they don't have a piece of vital information now because they killed the guy. Maybe they're banned from the village. And like there's a secret network of, I don't know, village elders, and now they're banned from every other village, they won't realize till they get there. But yeah, you need to have something like, how would people protect themselves? Because we all know that there will be a party of D&D players who will just mess shit up just to be funny, and it's not funny.
Yeah, I mean, that also is really, to like go back into the session 0 thing, establish the vibe you want for this world. If you want it to be just like, haha, we're gonna go around and be a bunch of just murderers, maybe just have a chat with your players and establish like, that's gonna lead to consequences just so you know.
Just make them aware of that, definitely. Okay, so another tip I have written here. I don't know, if you expected segues, there aren't going to be any of them because I just go for the stuff I've written down. When you're writing your world, we talked about this on Friday as well, it's really helpful to have ambience in the background, atmospheric music. I, for example, am a goth. I like writing dark, kind of like twisted, fantasy, My Chemical Romance like worlds. I'm fine with that. So having